Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be creating our Testinfra environment within our kitchen environment, within our repository that we have for Salt, to go ahead and test our VMs whenever we launch them. Meaning that just because the salt state or high state passes on the convergence test with kitchen doesn't mean that it's all good and dandy. We still need to be able to test them out, make sure that the files that we want to create or modify and so on exist in a specific format, the services exist and are running, and so on and so on. And we're going to be using Testinfra to write that particular test in Python. Again, you don't need to know Python too well. I'll go ahead and guide you through, but it should be fairly easy. So we're going to use the Python test files to test our kitchen VMs to make sure that our application or our kitchen VM environment is exactly how we want it. Now, with that said, we also need to sort of configure this this environment. So whoever you pass it to must be able to go ahead and install, or sorry, just run in a single or two installs, and they will have all the stuff they need. They'll have Testinfra, they'll have PyTest, they'll have Kitchen Salt, and so on. And they should be able to go ahead and get to it. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go ahead and create the requirement packages. So for the Python ones, we'll have requirements.txt, and then for the Ruby ones, which is what Test Kitchen is based off of, we'll have the gem file. So that way they'll be able to install with bundle and of course pip. So let's go ahead and create that. All right, so here I'm just going to put it in the base environment since there's really no need to put it anywhere else. So I'll create a requirements.txt, and if I need Testinfra, PyTest logging, Paramiko, PyTest, and PyYAML. So and I missed one. It is PyYAML. There we go. And we're just going to name this requirements.txt. Basically, what you'll be doing is if you hand this repo, or somebody were to clone this repo to they just started, then rather than somebody else telling them, hey, you need to install PyTest and all this other stuff, they can just run salt pip -r and then the requirements.txt file, and they'll go ahead and install everything from there. Now, this only works for Python packages. It doesn't work for the Ruby stuff that we have, for example, Kitchen Salt, Vagrant, and Test Kitchen. So we're going to go ahead and create a new file called gemfile, and then we're going to make that, we're going to put the Ruby dependencies here. So source, let me make sure I've got my syntax set to Ruby, source, rubygems.org. And we've got gem, I've got Test Kitchen, Kitchen Salt, and Kitchen Vagrant. Actually, I think I need Kitchen Vagrant before. The order does matter here. All right, so I've got that, and I'm going to name this gem file. And it still put the appraisals here. So I need to get rid of that. Not sure why it does that. All right, so let's go ahead and run that again. So we're in the directory. And it should go ahead and install everything in the gem file. Yep, there we go. So it's sourcing rubygems.org. And then it's grabbing any metadata, which we have none. And I've got everything already installed. So that's that. Now, let's go ahead and do the same thing for Python as well. Sudo pip install -r requirements.txt. Now I've got two pips because I have Python 3 as well, so I'm going to run both. And yep, so that did it for my Python 2.7, and this will do it for Python 3. All right, so that goes ahead and install the packages. So whoever you share the repo with now, they'll just need to run the bundle install as well, and then the the pip install, and they should be able to have everything that you would have to test that to run this repo. All right, so now that being said, what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go ahead and create a couple directories, and I'm gonna do this a little backwards. I'm going to go ahead and create the directory with the test files. Then I'm going to go ahead and create the configuration to connect to that particular, to connect Testinfra to the particular VM. And then I'm going to go ahead and mess with the kitchen.yaml file. So if I go back to my original plan here, we just went ahead and created the required packages. Next, what we would do is we would modify the kitchen YAMLs. So we have a structured VM where everything gets run, and we don't have too many duplicates. Like for example, there's no reason to have web01 and web02 anymore. We're just gonna have web. We're gonna have default, and we're gonna have web. Web is only gonna have the states that's specific to web, and not any of the existing states that are required. So they'll still get used, but the ones that are required and not explicitly stated, they'll be under default and not web. Next, there's the conf test to write. Now, this is basically a file that will open up Testinfra to the kitchen VM. So Testinfra is actually locally on my Mac right now. And what this file will do is it will open up Testinfra to log into the kitchen VM so that we can go ahead and run our tests from the file that we specified, that we write. Last but not least is the actual file. We're going to be writing our states in a specific directory, and then the kitchen VM will run Testinfra. Our kitchen YAML setup is going to run Testinfra from my local machine, which will then use a conf test to look to run the test files that we set up in the specific directory on those machines remotely. So that way we basically get to run tests remotely from my local machine to the VM, and it will return what passed and what failed, and then we just go from there. Okay, but I'm going to do this a little bit backwards. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create the directories to where the test files live. And if you're used to Chef, then you probably know these directories. So it's going to be test, and then it's going to be integration. So, and then after integration, we're going to have the suites and then Testinfra. So the suite we're going to have, for example, we're going to have a web suite, and then we're going to have a default suite. So I'll create a default folder, and then I'll create a web folder. And then inside the default folder, I'll create a Testinfra folder here. And inside the web folder, I'll create another Testinfra folder here as well. Okay. So the idea is that the kitchen YAML that we already have, we're going to go ahead and get rid of web. And we'll just have web, and then we'll have default. Now this is the suite. So when we when we have the verifier, which will go ahead and run our Testinfra test, it will go into these folders, and it'll go to the suite, which is going to be either default or web. And Testinfra will go into the Testinfra folder and run all of the Python files there, which will be all the tests. Now, the configuration test to connect to the VM for kitchen, that will live in a conf-test.py file in the integration folder. And so right now that we've got that, let's go ahead and create a basic generic test that we can have. In fact, we'll create one. I know we've got Apache installed on our web VM, on our web kitchen VM. So let's just go ahead and test out if Apache is installed. I've got a test here already from their website. So it's a service. Apache's a service, and we just do Apache is running. So let's see. It's okay. So is running and is enabled. So let's set this to Python. def test Apache service. Service equal. Now this is different. I'm specifying HTTPD because it's a Red Hat based Linux. If you're running Ubuntu, you'd say Apache 2 in this case. So assert service.isRunning. And I believe that's what it is. Yep, so service is running. Now we don't have to specify equals or anything, unlike in PyTest or unit tests. This automatically evaluates to true, if it evaluates to true. So we don't have to do anything about that. So now that we've got that, I'm going to name this file. Let's go ahead and name this test Apache. Now, note something here. The function, the declaration of the function is done by def. This is a service that will be calling conf test in a different file, which I'll explain later on. And all this is doing is calling the generator service to look at HTTPD, and service is running and whether it returns true or false. Now, the function, whatever you're testing, must start with test underscore something. And if it starts with test underscore something, Testinfra will take a look at it and try to evaluate it. If it doesn't start with Testinfra will ignore it. However, that being said, I can have other functions here. For example, I can have other functions here, and the test function that you write, you have to have one test function that will call the other non-test function. So I am something and then some parameter. It can work that way, and that can return something, and then if it returns something, great. But the only one that's going to get called by Testinfra is the ones that start with the test name. So be careful with that. All right. That being said, that's my function. That's my statement. I'm going to go ahead and save that, and I've got my test created. What else are we running? Let's see here. In my top.sls, I've got Flask application and Flask and Apache. So I'm already testing for Apache. My Flask runs on port 8000, so we can go ahead and test that too. But I'm going to go ahead and put that in a different file instead of the Apache file. So let's do new file. So def test Flask. And put this in Python. There we go. And this is going to be the port. So I believe if I look at socket, yep, here we go. So that's the format we want. So socket equals socket. Oops. Yep. Oh, wrong socket. TCP 0.0.0.0:8000, and then assert socket dot. I believe it is listening. Yes, it is listening. So socket dot is listening, and that should either evaluate to true or false. And if it evaluates to false, then just like here. So if it evaluates to false, then it'll fail. If it evaluates to true, then it will pass. Okay, so now that I've got my, oops, I need to name this test underscore Flask. Also, I name my files test underscore whatever it is, just to keep it safe. I believe I don't need, no, actually, I'm sorry. You do need to, with Testinfra, you do need to name test underscore something else for the file name as well as for the function name as well. And okay, so this won't actually run any of our tests yet. We still need to create the conf test, which is next, and then we still need to modify the kitchen YAML, which is after that. So this is going to be basically a series of videos. This part is now incomplete, so go ahead and follow up in the next video. I'll see you guys then.